Welcome to a new deep dive. Today, we're tackling something huge, something we all do constantly.
Talking. Language itself.
Exactly, but maybe not in the way you usually think about it. We're looking at its origins, its very nature. And our guide for this is an article, 8 Theories of Human Language, A New Paradigm by Mahmudjon Kuchkarov.
Right, and the title says it all, really. A new paradigm.
It does. The article puts forward, 8 discoveries the author feels science hasn't fully caught up with yet.
Fundamental discoveries, it calls them.
So, our mission today, let's unpack these 8 ideas, see what they're about, why the source thinks they're significant.
And maybe see language through a fresh pair of eyes.
Yeah.
And what's really key here, right from the start, is that this source suggests a shift away from, say, Saussure or Chomsky.
The big names.
Right, and toward something different. Language as natural coding, evolving through use tied to our environment.
Not just arbitrary symbols or pure biology.
Precisely. It's a potentially very different angle.
Okay, let's get into it. 8 theories. Where do we start? The source says the first one is the big one.
Yeah, the human language theory, or Odam Tili, as the author terms it.
Odam Tili. And the core idea.
Well, it's basically saying language isn't just random sounds we agreed on.
Or just biology.
Or just biology, yeah. It's a system that developed naturally, based on acoustic codes.
Acoustic codes, meaning the sounds themselves have meaning.
That's the idea. Like a code built from sound, shaped by how we are, our bodies, our minds, how we interact with the world. Practical stuff.
Okay, that's already interesting. Does it give examples?
It does, and this is where it gets really concrete. Take the Uzbek, that hiss.
Okay, like in snake.
Or smooth, squeeze in English. But also, the source points to Uzbek words like silik, sik.
And what's the link?
The argument is that the ez sound across languages acts as a kind of universal code for natural movements.
Yeah.
Smooth, flowing, maybe constricting movements.
Wow. So the sound itself carries a meaning related to movement, not just the word.
Exactly. And the significance, according to the source, well, it forces a rethink, doesn't it?
About where words come from?
Yeah. How sounds got linked to meanings. If it's not arbitrary, if it's tied to the physical world through sound, that's a big shift.
Okay. That sets the stage. What's theory number 2?
It builds right on that. It's called the language of water and movement.
Ah, so focusing that movement idea.
Specifically on water. It's using water as a prime example of these acoustic codes in action.
How so?
The source highlights words for water, like su in Turkic languages, or su in Kyrgyz. It even mentions shu in Russian, relating to sound and movement.
And it says sound is key again.
It seems so. The idea is that su, maybe with certain vowels, captures that lively, fluid motion, water flowing, or like you said, a snake.
So our words for water literally sound like water moving in some fundamental way.
That's the claim. The significance pointed out is how nature, especially dynamic things like water, maybe air too, gets encoded right into the sounds of language.
That ties language history really closely to, ecology, our environment.
Much more closely than maybe we usually think.
Okay, theory 3.
Phonetic foundations and symbolism in alphabets.
So, moving from sounds to the letters we write them with.
Sort of. It's saying that the basic sounds, the phonemes, and their symbols in alphabets might carry inherent meanings too, not just arbitrary shapes.
Okay, give me an example.
The main one used is the sound A, that open vowel sound. Right. The source argues it inherently signifies openness, open space, open time. A starting point.
And that's why it's the first letter. In Latin, Greek, Cyrillic, Arabic, Hebrew.
That's the connection the source makes. It even links it to the first sound a baby makes crying, often that ah sound, a primal opening.
Wow. And the source goes further, right? Something about religious texts.
Yes, it mentions the Quran's Aleph Lam meme, suggesting these might also reflect this deep symbolism, Aleph being the A. The significance here, as presented, is showing these potential deep links between language, what the source calls divine teachings, and biology.
It frames language as being shaped by really fundamental laws, not just culture.
Exactly, natural laws, which makes you ask how much of language is just part of the universe's fabric and our nature.
Deep question. Okay, theory 4 takes a turn, doesn't it? The Garden of Eden.
It really does. A symbolic interpretation of the Garden of Eden.
Symbolic of what?
Not world creation, the source argues, but the birth of human language.
So Adam, Eve, the tree, the serpent, they represent language.
They symbolize that moment. Humanity starting to use acoustic codes consciously, To understand, to interact with the world, language structure itself, the source claims, is grounded in sounds associated with these figures.
So when the story says Adam named the animals?
The interpretation here is that that symbolizes the very act of creating the first acoustic codes. Naming is coding.
That's a very different reading.
It is. And the significance drawn is using these ancient symbols, these myths, as a lens to understand language origins and its role in civilization, but from this new natural coding perspective.
Right. Okay, let's switch gears a bit. Theory 5 sounds more structural. The generational hierarchy of phonemes.
Yeah, this one tries to classify sounds, phonemes, in a new way, into 3 generations.
Generations.
First generation, basic, single phones, like N, P, K, V. The source suggests these often work like negators or markers of opposition.
Like N for no or negation.
Kind of like that, yeah. An inherent negative or opposite quality. Then second generation, combinations of 2 sounds, like and or in.
Okay.
The example given is and, meaning like negating space, which gets linked to possession. It's mine, not out there.
Right.
And the reverse, na, or the full form ana in some languages, means an object in that possessed space, the opposite state. And then third generation, that's our familiar words, morphemes, built from the first 2 generations.
So it's like Lego bricks, basic sound concepts combining into complex meanings.
That's the picture it paints. A dynamic evolution of structure based on these sound generations. A different view of linguistic hierarchy.
Interesting. Theory 6 seems to bring in time. Synchrony and diachrony, revisited.
Yeah, it contrasts this view with Saussure's classic ideas, looking at language at one point in time versus across time.
But it proposes something different.
It proposes a kind of natural movement within language itself, tied to those acoustic codes of motion again.
How does that work?
The example used is the phone of O, apparently representing downward motion.
Okay.
At a P sound, O key, and indicates upward motion.
Right.
But then it adds another layer. If the lift fails, the state goes back to something represented as a cope, like a cycle encoded in sound.
So sounds aren't static labels. They're showing actions, changes, processes.
That's the idea presented, yes. Language as an active, dynamic thing mirroring physical motion and processes, not just a fixed system.
Oh, okay. Theory 7 looks broader, the connection between nature and culture in language.
Right. This one looks for similarities across languages we usually think are totally separate.
Like which ones?
The source specifically mentions Turkic and Native American languages, finding similar sounds or words.
And seeing that as evidence of
universal natural coding.
Yeah.
Not just separate cultural evolution. Evidence that language evolution follows global patterns rooted in nature.
What kind of similarity?
It points to basic words, like ata for father, ani for mother, finding similar forms across these language groups.
Wow. Words for father and mother sounding alike in places you wouldn't expect. That is striking.
It is. And the significance the source draws is that maybe languages aren't as separate as we think. Maybe they share these deep natural foundations, universal principles guiding how they develop.
Fascinating. Okay, last one. Theory 8. The secondary structure of human language. This sounds intriguing.
It's definitely got a twist.
Yeah.
It starts by saying there are really only 2 fundamental languages.
2, which are?
The language of nature, which it equates with physics, structured by math, and the language of humans.
Okay.
But then it makes a really bold claim that the original human language stems from Turkic languages, nomadic languages.
Why Turkic?
The source suggests it was coded originally for practical reasons, maybe even military communication, situations where hands are busy, perhaps with weapons.
So, like, the first human language was a kind of military code.
That's the proposal. And that all other human languages are basically variations or shadows of this primary Turkic-based language.
A military origin for all language that really flips the script.
It's definitely provocative. The source compares it to the internet, started as military tech, became universal.
Huh. Never thought of it like that.
And the significance here is arguing for a single origin, monogenesis, shaped by extremes. War, peace, how these pressures drive innovation, like technology.
And language.
And language, too, raising questions about what really drives our communication systems. Is it just social need or these kinds of extreme pressures?
Wow. Okay, so that's the 8 theories. Stepping back, what's the big picture here?
Well, this deep dive into the source, it's presenting a really unified, maybe radical vision of language.
Not just grammar and words.
Not at all. It's about these acoustic codes tied to everything. Nature, biology, history, myth, even physics.
And the author, Mahmudjon Kuchkarov, through this Odam Tili framework, He's really challenging the status quo, isn't he?
Absolutely. The source is quite explicit. It says, these theories should make us rethink not just language, but our whole history, our civilization's path through this lens of natural coding.
It mentions decades of research behind this.
Yeah, 30 years. And this idea for a human language academy in Odam Tili Akademiasi to explore it further.
It's definitely a framework trying to connect language to something universal, fundamental forces.
In a very direct, sound-based way, suggesting the connection between us and the world through sound is much deeper than we usually assume.
So we've explored these 8 theories from the source material. Pretty fascinating, sometimes challenging ideas.
Definitely. Is proposing this whole different way to look at something we think we know so well, language. Rooted in nature, sound codes, universal principles.
Not just culture or arbitrary signs.
It pushes back against that, yeah. Suggesting these deep links across fields we don't normally connect to, linguistics, biology, physics, mythology, even military history.
It really gives you a lot to think about.
It does.
So here's a final thought to take away. If language really is built on these natural acoustic codes, if sounds link directly to movement, to nature, maybe even physics, what does that mean for how we think?
How we perceive the world.
Exactly. Could it be that the very sounds we use aren't just labels we learned, but are actually echoes? Echoes of fundamental processes in the universe.
What if our speech resonates with the world in a way we haven't realized?
Something to ponder, for sure. Makes you want to listen. Really listen to the words you use every day.
Listen for those echoes.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope it's given you some new perspectives on language.